Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you for tonight. Thank you for everybody that's here. And God, we know there are others who usually are trying to get here and just work makes them come a little bit later. So we just pray for them that you'd help them get in safely. And Lord, we welcome your Holy Spirit to give us understanding. Help us with these difficult passages of Scripture. We also pray, Father, for everybody who watches at other times our class. We pray for them that your Spirit would be with them as well as they read the passages, as they watch the video, that you would help them to have understanding of these things as well. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, as I said a minute ago, if you didn't hear me or were in the kitchen or something, we got a few more coming in right now. We are starting in Daniel tonight, and we're going to put off Proverbs for a little bit. Some of you said last week, let's just go straight to Daniel because it takes so long to get rolling on this, and then once you get into it, it's time to stop. So we are in Daniel chapter 7. We ended last week in verse 18. The way tonight's going to work, well, let me start by what I did last week, in case you may miss that. And it'll also help you understanding how we're going to go at it this week. And it's going to seem like maybe some repetition, but it's really not. It's a lot of new stuff. But so last week we read Daniel 7 verse 1, and we came down through, we read 1 through 8, which described the vision of the four beasts. And we went into how they came up out of the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean. And one was like a lion with eagle's wings. One was like a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. And the third one was like a leopard that had 4 wings and 4 heads. And then there was this massive beast, unlike anything else, that didn't match with any animal on earth. What we did was we read through that. And really, I didn't camp out on much of anything. I just kind of talked about the very opening, how the vision began, what Daniel saw, things like that. But as far as the beasts go, we really didn't go into any detail on any of them because it's important to kind of get the big picture since there's not only the listing of the 4 beasts, but there's also the interpretation of them, which is what we got into at the very end of class last week. So here's the thing. If I had tried to go into great detail on each of the beasts in verses 1 through 8, I would have needed to jump ahead to verse 19, where we would be starting that and reading down, because that's the interpretation of the 4th. And so what I did instead was we kind of went through and got all the way up to the point where he's getting the interpretation, so you know where it fits. And so let me just real quickly kind of recap. We read through the 4 beasts, and I just named what they were like. I have them kind of listed up here: the lion, the bear, the leopard, the 10-horned beast. Those are the shortened versions of their name. And then we went into a scene of the throne room. Right now we're just recapping. So the scene of the throne room where it says, until the thrones were set and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Now when it talks about thrones were set, if you were to go to Revelation 4, it talks about the thrones of the 24 elders. That's mentioned in Revelation 4. So most likely those thrones, plural, are the 24 elders mentioned in Revelation. And then you have the Ancient of Days, who is God Almighty the Father, who comes and sits down and describes him. We also talked about how that description is like the description of Jesus in the first chapter of Revelation. Then we went through and it talks about how it is the court sat, the books were open. We talked about the similarities between a judgment happening in Revelation 20, where the the white throne judgment happens. It's the only place you find in Scripture where books are open and judgment begins to take place. So we were looking at the similarities between how the books were opened here in Daniel 7 and how they were opened in Revelation. Then we went into how it mentions a beast being slain and destroyed and thrown into the burning fire, and how the rest of the beasts. So we talk about the beast right there, and that's speaking of the fourth beast, the one that couldn't be described as anything else. And then when it says the other beast, it's the reference back to the lion, the bear, and the leopard, okay? Because remember, these were 4 beasts, but one of them doesn't get connected to any earthly animal because of its ferociousness. It's how terrorizing it is. So as we got to that, then the scene changes back and we see where it's talking about the Son of Man coming. We went into great detail about that, how he's coming on the clouds, how that's found in Revelation and in the Gospels, and how he comes in the Ancient of Days, presents his kingdom to him. And it says there in chapter 7, verse 14, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away. So what we did was we just made the connection. Without doubt, we're talking about Jesus, because this is a kingdom that his dominion will never stop. We know we're talking about Jesus here. We know that the Son of Man is a reference to Jesus. He calls himself that in the Gospels. We know that if he's approaching the Ancient of Days, that's the Father who's giving him the kingdom. And by the way, these things are mentioned in the New Testament. So what we were doing last week is really, when we were in that area, as well as in verse 9 through 10, we were talking about how these things are connecting. These prophecies in Daniel are connecting to things Jesus says in Matthew 24 and Matthew 25, to things that John writes in the book of Revelation in multiple places, to things that Paul writes in Thessalonians. And so that's what last week was like for the most part. Then we get to verse 15 of chapter 7, where Daniel says, my spirit was distressed because of the 4 beasts he saw. And he said, the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who was standing by and began asking him. So remember, I kind of made the joke last week. Daniel is overwhelmed with what he's seen. He doesn't know what it means. He looks around, hey, you look like you know something. And he asks, what does this mean? And so this is the place where we were wrapping up last week. And we're about to be in new. Shane and Winnie, we decided not to do Proverbs. We're just going to go straight into Daniel this week. So that's why we're not talking about Proverbs right now. So
we'll do without the wisdom.
We'll do without the wisdom. We'll catch up later, right? So, Daniel's got quite a bit of it in there, but we're not talking about the wisdom right now. We're talking about the prophecy. But all right. So standing by, began asking him the exact meaning of all of this, that is the 4 visions. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So this is the value of what we're coming into tonight, how we're going to begin to connect the angel's interpretation of at least one of those beasts. So tonight will be spent really talking about these 4 beasts. What they could mean, the different ideas and interpretations and reasoning behind that. And I think that's going to take most of our time, to be honest. But I really couldn't go into that detail last week because I would have had to have skipped that whole middle section on the Ancient of Days, the Son of Man coming, all those different things. And I didn't want to skip that. So we kind of went through. Now we're going to go back and really put focus on those 4 beasts and what they might mean. So instead of starting in verse 19 right now, because that's really where Daniel asks for an exact meaning of the 4th beast. All right? So what that says to us, though, if I just read that one verse, verse 19, he wants to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast. What many commentators note here, something that we should all take note of, is that Daniel he doesn't have any question about the first beast, or the second, or the third. He's not alarmed by them. He's not curious. He doesn't seem to have a question. So a lot of commentators think he knows the lion is directly connecting to Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, the same as the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar, right? And we know without any doubt, because Scripture tells us that the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon, as I said last week. We know that why? Because God gave the interpretation to Daniel to tell Nebuchadnezzar in his dream that he was the head of gold, right? We remember all that. The number two, the bear, most ancient and modern theologians, and I say most, there's always plenty of people with other views, but most do believe that is Cyrus and Medo-Persia, which is again mirroring what chapter 2 said. So you got chapter 7 and you got chapter 2, both speaking of Babylon, Medo-Persia, in that order. But here, instead of it being called a head of gold and a breast of arms of silver, it's the lion and the bear. Then you go to the leopard, and again, everybody's about in the same, that it's Alexander the Great. Greece is the leopard, right? So those three pretty commonly are held by the majority to believe that they are connected. Here's the interesting thing. Even folks so the commentator that I've got tonight, this is Barnes' Notes. This was written in the 1850s, right? He himself does not hold to a future dispensational premillennial type of view like you would hear from John Hagee or some of the, goodness, all the names of the people that hold to it. There's a ton of them, but Hal Lindsey, all those type of writers and guys that you'll see a lot on TBN, he doesn't hold that. In fact, when we get to his idea of the interpretation of the 10-horned beast and what it is, he's believing it was Roman and sees that it's the little horn. I'll get into all that in a little bit, but he has a view that was very popular in that day and time. So he doesn't even have this end time perspective of Antichrist and all that in mind at all. And yet, he still believes these are all connected. The reason I'm saying that is because people who have more of a futurist view, where we're talking about the Antichrist and things like that at the end, when we talk about this little horn and stuff like that, they too, many of them hold to all this being the same as this. And in fact, they'll say it repeats a third time in up in another few chapters in Daniel, that these four kingdoms are mentioned in a row 3 times in Daniel. All right. Does anybody have a question so far? Because I don't want to be talking so fast that I don't give time for questions and comments. And plus, if I'm saying things that don't make any sense to you, tell me. Sometimes it's real easy when you've been reading a lot of stuff to just say things.
So remember, when we've seen the statue, and then you see the lion, the bear, and the leopard.
Yeah.
Oh, now I can understand that.
Yeah. So let me just read some really good stuff that no matter what view you were to come up with, this is just some really good statements. So this is what he writes regarding like the lion, but the whole thing says something really good. It is to be assumed in explaining and applying these symbols, that is, symbols like the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the lion having eagle's wings, the leopard having 4 sets of wings, 4 heads, and the bear with the ribs. He's talking about the symbolism, and he's saying that in explaining and applying these symbols, they are significant. That is, that there was some adaptedness or propriety in using these symbols to denote the kingdoms referred to. So, kind of obvious, but I want to make the statement anyways. There's a reason God chooses to show Daniel a lion with eagle's wings, right? And there's a reason that that lion with eagle's wings will have its wings plucked, and then it will stand up like a man and be given the heart of a man. There's all those symbols. There's a reason God gives that, and it will connect with the nation that that it's representing. That's what he's saying, and it makes absolute sense. In regard to the first beast, that is the lion, there were 5 things that entered into the symbol, all of which is to be presumed to be significant. So those wings are one of them, right? The fact that they're plucked, the beast standing up, the heart of a man, all those are things that we would connect. And so you're looking for a kingdom. What he does that I am not going to take the time to do, because it would take a few classes to get through all of our beasts if I did this. He goes through in great detail and makes a really strong case for how the lion fits with Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. He does the same with the bear and Medo-Persia and Cyrus and the leopard and Alexander the Great. And the way he does it, if I can just very kind of in a very short, brief, Cliff's Notes way of doing this, he talks about what is a lion known for. A lion is known for being its power, its dominion, its sovereignty, and he makes that connection with Nebuchadnezzar. And if you guys remember when we talked about him being the head of gold, we talked about Nebuchadnezzar, that he had ultimate power, more than any other king under him. He could say who lived and died, and he didn't have a council, he didn't have senators, he had nobody to answer to. He could do whatever he wanted. So they make that similarity with him. They also say that because his kingdom was advancing like crazy, and he had like this ravenous hunger like a lion, and then it stops. And the wings have to do with the expanse of his kingdom, because a lion doesn't go outside of its territory, but eagles soar over great distances. And he says the reason that you have things combining, it's like a lion. Well, part of the character of this king and kingdom is found in a lion, but not every part of this king and kingdom is found in a lion. So another animal is added to it to help you understand, okay, it's not just like a lion where it's like the king of all beasts, and every other beast sees it as the king, right? That's the way Nebuchadnezzar was in his day. Everybody saw him as the king of kings. That term is actually used regarding Nebuchadnezzar. The eagle's wings are put into it to show how vast and how quickly the kingdom would spread, and the amount of territory that he would take in versus a lion staying in its area. So that's what I want you to hear. I don't necessarily want to go through every single one and explain all of them, but that's the type of thing that you get when you begin to break this down. They begin to look at historical facts and show how Cyrus was very much like the bear, and the whole raising up on one side and everything. Some saw it as more standing up on hind legs, as being on one side versus all fours. But what Barnes tends to lean toward is it's more of when the bear is down there, and in the picture, think about this, a bear on all fours, it's got ribs in its mouth. The image is the bear has already conquered and is chewing it up, right? And he's at a resting place chewing, and then whenever he begins to rise up, that one side rises up. It's like he's coming up on one. And so that's how some people are seeing what that means with one side raised. I think it's the way that the passage says it in the scripture. So without going and just keeping on going, that's basically what there's a pretty good case for connecting all of these. That's the short version of it. Does anybody have a question about that? I really don't want to take all of your time trying to explain each one, but I will certainly do it if you would like to.
Okay.
We The leopard?
Yeah, because the lion
Yeah.
and the leopard would be different.
Exactly. So the leopard fits with Greece, and the reason they say why is because Alexander the Great also, like a lion, there was more of a, oh goodness, I'm trying to think of the right word. It had to do with like a kingly, I'll find the word that they used. They used a great word to describe it that was similar to how a lion is, because both of them operate in the same way. Unlike a bear is ferocious and destroys. I mean, if you attack a bear's cubs, it's amazing how many ancients they quoted in here who talked about what a bear is like. And they made these comments about how there's no animal on the planet. This is back in the days of Jerome, and we're talking very, very ancient writers here. And they're saying there's no animal that gets so angry as a bear when their cubs are attacked. And they made all these connections. Well, the same with the leopard, Debbie. They talk about how the leopard is distinguished for its bloodthirstiness, its cruelty, but also its dignity, like the dignity of a lion, right? So a lion is this stately animal that walks around nice and slow, but is very, very, very powerful and very respected. Bears, I forgot which writer wrote this. I think it was Aristotle. Aristotle said bears are known to be silly and foolhardy, but also greedy. He also wrote in another place that they were ferocious, right? And if you think about a bear, if you've ever watched footage, a bear can just sit and play like a child. But you also don't want to surprise one who has cubs near, because you won't see a silly, foolhardy bear. You'll see a ferocious one that will kill you really quick, right?
The silly one is a black bear, a ferocious one is a grizzly.
And then their types can play in that as well, right? So, but we see them play. We know what these writers are talking about. But when it got to the leopard, it said, you know, it's not an animal that is foolhardy or just wild with anger. It hunts, it's quiet, it waits, it watches. There's more of this dignity, and that's the way a lion is. So it made those comparisons. So what they did was they said, that's the way Alexander operated as he conquered. It's the way Nebuchadnezzar was. But Cyrus, they actually quote much history of battles and things that took place, the way that not just Cyrus, but other kings under the Persian Empire, the cruelty by which they attacked the Ethiopians and things like that. I won't, again, it's a lot, so I'm not going to go there. But I just wanted to say enough to say there's a lot of history and other things that are good reasoning for why these would connect. The thing that really begins to be the mystery and where a lot of interpretation begins to play in is that fourth beast. The same reason that Daniel says, what does that mean? So everybody says that Daniel probably didn't have much problem with these three. Like, either he connected them to what he had seen in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, either he connected them and made that, or he's like, it's probably kingdoms like this, and he's thinking they're just kingdoms, right? Now, before we get into this 10-horned beast, which is where we're heading, there are two different views. Or I should say, I'll say this as we get into this 10-horned beast. When you read back in 1850s, the two prominent views of what this 10-horned beast was either this is representing, as far as a nation, they would say the Greek Empire, the Macedonian Empire. And then they would say that the small horn that was mentioned would be Antiochus Epiphanes. Now before we go unpacking all that, let's go to verse 19 and let's read down Let's read all the way to from 19. Let's read all the way to the end of the chapter, verse 28, and then we'll just take our time tonight talking about that.
I'll read it.
Okay.
Then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them until the ancient days, and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of its Most High. And the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times and half a time. Did I read that right? Holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High Kingdom. His kingdom will be everlasting. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ann.
You're welcome.
That's a big passage.
Very good.
This shows how terrifying the fourth beast was. That what he saw was so unlike the other 3. Now let me start by saying this. I'm probably gonna bounce around a lot, but I prayed to God to help me.
But isn't that the key? The key to me from between chapter 2 and chapter 7 is where it starts in 19.
Yeah.
It was so different.
Yeah.
Number 4 isn't different like, the 10 horn beast is or anything else.
Exactly. This is not different at all. This fits very well with Rome and Caesar doing what he does. This stands out very, very different. And so in the end, I'm going to talk about 2 possible interpretations of how you see these things put together. These 3 are not alarming. This one is so alarming. He doesn't have an animal to fit with it. And so it's like he is so terrorized. And think about this. This king, if this is truly Nebuchadnezzar, right? It's like a lion with eagle's wings. Think of the power and the ferociousness of a lion with eagle's wings and the conquering power and unbridled power of Nebuchadnezzar. Think about this one's called the bear because of the horrible things the Persians, the Medo-Persian Empire did to different nations as they attacked them. We know the Greeks spread far and wide. Now they weren't known to be as horrible, but they still did much warfare. This one is so far beyond, and like Shane was pointing out, over here it just fits one nation after another. What I have wondered, and I kind of drew this up because a few days ago, or maybe it's a week ago, when I was reading and studying this at home, I began to think, what if Daniel 2 is speaking of the first coming of Christ? That it has, certainly we know the head of gold is, I'm out of the camera thing, I got to turn over here. Certainly we know that the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar. We've already established why, because God gave Daniel the interpretation. We know what these are. But this fits really well with the Roman Empire coming as that fourth one, legs of iron and so on. And when you go back to Daniel 2, what you have there is you have the kingdom being established. Remember the stone? The stone, and it becomes a great mountain. So it's in chapter 2, and the interpretation comes at verse 32. The head of that statue was made of fine gold, its breasts of silver, its belly of bronze, its legs of iron, partly iron and clay. And he said, you continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet in iron and clay, and it crushed them. Then the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were crushed all at the same time. So what that seems to be saying, as we talked about a few weeks ago, is that these all represent kingdoms of this world, and this stone is going to cause all of these kingdoms to be crushed. Now we know it's not one at a time, so what we know is, like we talked about before, this is a picture of a whole statue. The whole statue is the kingdoms of the world, right? And what is going to come to an end? The kingdoms of man is what's going to come to an end. Who's going to reign when the kingdoms of man come to an end? Jesus is going to reign, right? We know that that's in Revelation. That's it's in Daniel. It's described. We know that's what is coming. The millennial reign is the reign and rule of Christ, and it's mentioned in Revelation. So you could say, well, is this an end time picture? If it is, how does that all fit? The stone that struck the statue. Well, I think you can look at this as the beginning of the kingdom, and it follows right after or during the reign and the kingdom of Rome is when Jesus is born. All right? And so he's born. The kingdom begins when he comes. And he is the stone that is cut out without human hands. But that stone will grow into, it says the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain, which says that it starts out as a stone, which could be here, but it's going to grow into a great mountain. That to me is a picture of the church. It begins with Christ, then his disciples, and then it begins to grow. So it goes from one rock to all of us being in Christ, a great mountain, which is a whole lot of rocks put together, right? So if we were to say, what if chapter 2 is really a picture and an order of what's coming ahead, and then Christ comes on the scene for the first advent, his first coming, born in Bethlehem, born in a manger, dies on a cross. He comes as that the suffering servant, very different than the second coming. Why would I do this and make up this separation? Well, it kind of goes back to what Shane said a minute ago about verse 19. This can't be explained. This is so much more horrible. And what I was saying a minute ago, one of the strong views back at this time, and for some it still is a strong view, is that you have, if you remember what we read back there in chapter 7, if we go back, it talks about that little horn. It's called a little horn when you first read the vision in chapter 7 and verse 8. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them. Okay? When you go over to the interpretation, it says, it talks about in the meaning of verse 20, and the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up before which 3 of them fell, that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance. Remember, it starts out, as it comes up, it's a little horn. But it says that through the great boast and everything, it appears as a larger horn. And he says, I kept looking at that horn, the little horn that seems to appear as a larger horn because of its great boast. He says, I kept looking at that horn, and it was waging war with the saints and overpowering them. Okay? Now, what one view of that little horn and the beast it comes out of. One view is, as I said a minute ago, that this is actually the Greek Empire, and the little horn is not Alexander the Great, but Antiochus Epiphanes. And I believe it was 165 BC when he lived. What he did was he profaned the temple in Jerusalem. Went in, sacrificed a pig on the altar. He profaned it, which is, Daniel speaks about the abomination that causes desolation. All right? So a lot of people in history have said, well, Antiochus Epiphanes, there's no doubt that he caused an abomination or brought about an abomination that caused desolation in the temple. He did that. And so they're saying, well, he raised himself up against God. And yes, there are plenty of things that fit here. But there's also lots of problems with Antiochus Epiphanes being the little horn. And I'll get into some of that in just a minute. But let me go to the next big view at this time, and still today, some will talk about this. And that is that the 10-horned beast is Rome, and the little beast is the papacy. Right? So, in fact, the guy who wrote this commentary, he says there's a lot more evidence for that than there is for Antiochus Epiphanes being the little horn, even though that was maybe even a more popular view in the time that he was writing this. But he points out some really good problems with Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, what he does not point out in any kind of detail is a third option that he does mention in some small print here. And that third option is, if such is the proper application, what are we to look for in the future in what remains unfulfilled in regard to prophecy? The third option is, or if Rome and the papacy, if this is, the third option is a future tense of this, which to me seems a lot more obvious when you read the New Testament, which these commentators had the New Testament. What they didn't have was Israel back in their homeland. So a lot of prophecies that they thought were being fulfilled in some kind of a spiritual way, they had not had the privilege that you and I have in 2024 of seeing Israel, the people, the nation, the Jewish nation, come back to their homeland. And that is a huge prophecy that wasn't fulfilled just spiritually, but was fulfilled physically.
I have a question.
Okay.
As I was kind of looking at both of the lists, the statue kind of goes in order, and you can see how each one is being conquered and the next one comes up.
Yes.
Is there like a certain time between them that correlates with, I mean, because it wouldn't make sense because it's not correlating time-wise, both this one and then that one. So obviously I would think that they're different. But is there like a certain time in between them that we should be looking to maybe like show it as a foreshadowing from this statue to the beasts?
No, what you've got here is, as far as the timeline goes in history, the Babylonians are conquered by the Persians, and that's in Daniel. Darius will set up when Belshazzar dies on that very night, the night that he sees the handwriting. Okay. Then they'll rule up till Alexander the Great defeats the Medo-Persians. So these connect one to another, and then the Greeks will fall to the Romans. Okay, so those all connect perfectly. And if this is Babylon, and this is the Persians, and this is the Greeks, they are on the same historical connection, one after another. It's just changing the image from a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze to a lion, bear, and a leopard.
But then wouldn't it, like, if it were to be the same thing, I guess, wouldn't it be where we would be already seeing the 10 horn beast? Like, if it's,
Well,
you know what I mean?
yes,
Okay.
and that's why I wrote this in orange, because what I'm saying is, if Daniel 2 is, and I almost went somewhere for a minute, just saying, if Daniel 2 is the order of those kingdoms, in history, those kingdoms fall in order right up to the Roman one, which when Christ comes. If this is playing out and it is talking about the end times, which the difference between the stone that strikes the statue and Jesus' kingdom beginning, if that's like the birth of Christ, notice at the end of each of these, you have the four kingdoms, the stone or Jesus and his kingdom set up, the judgment seat of God, and Jesus receives the kingdom. Do you see the similarities? Mm-hmm. 4 kingdoms and then Jesus in both of them. And I know this is confusing. I'm really glad you're asking the question here, because I don't want to, I'll stop somewhere and think of something and then I don't finish what I'm trying to say. I understand exactly what you're saying, that how does this fit at the end of these if it's these? And that's the part where I either God is saying in this dream that he gives to Daniel that these kingdoms are going to come. If you're a dispensational premillennialist, you believe in the dispensations of time, then you'd say that after this, the church age begins, and it lasts for however long, and then the Jews will be invited. It'll be the time of the Jews coming back in, and all those terms I studied a while back, but they're not fresh on the mind, or I'd give you all that. But that's one way I've been seeing it. And like I said, there's so many ways of interpreting all this. The other is, what if these are kingdoms more in a modern time leading up to this? I don't have your answer here. What I'm saying is, these kingdoms here seem to line up, and most theologians believe they line up. But what is interesting to me is this right here is last days. This is the judgment of God. We read the throne, didn't we? The Ancient of Days sets up thrones with the 24 elders. The Son of Man comes and receives the kingdom. That's not this language. This is a stone being formed without human hands. This is a stone that will grow into a mountain. This seems to be a picture of a start of the kingdom that will go all the way until he comes back. This seems to be the end of that kingdom and the handing over to Christ and to the saints. So at least that's what's going on in my head. I'm not trying to tell you all that.
It just makes more sense when you look at it, and I've heard so many different views of it too.
Yeah.
That makes sense in what you're saying. I mean, even on those, you can get into, on the 4 beasts, you can get into, a lot of debate about it. But even like the leopard, part of that too, leopard is very fast. Well, Alexander the Great conquered so quickly.
Very fast. Yeah.
And it goes right in line with it. I mean, all that makes sense. The only thing that doesn't, that correlates differently than what does in Daniel's number 2 is the 10-horned beast. And that to me seems what has yet to happen.
It does seem like that is a future thing. And that's where I'm like you, Shane. When we read about this and we're talking about a throne of God, and we're talking about the kingdom, the Son giving the kingdom and the saints receiving the kingdom, if you think, well, aren't the saints receiving it through this? Well, in a big picture, eventually, yes. But let's go to Revelation to kind of help with this, because this, what Shane just said is very true. It only gets confusing. You see, if we didn't have this 10-horned beast in here, that's the thing that throws a big wrench in all of it. And like we said, when you read Daniel 7, Daniel says, what is that? It throws a wrench. If God meant it to only be just the nation of Rome, why is it mentioned as something that is so horrible as it is? And why does the end of that beast's life come with the coming of the Messiah? Rome was not ended with Jesus coming. It carried on for hundreds of years afterward. there's a lot that doesn't make sense, and the same with Antiochus Epiphanes and all that. But let's go to Revelation for a minute, and let's look at when we begin to talk about where was I going when I said that? The judgment of God. Oh, the receiving of the kingdom. I believe it's in Revelation 13. So, Revelation 13, you've got maybe the most about the beast that we would call the Antichrist coming on the scene and all that. Beginning in chapter 13, verse 1 of Revelation, it says, "And the dragon stood on the sand." Chapter 12 introduces us to the red dragon, which is Satan. And that's all spelt out. It's not just me interpreting that. That's what it actually says. Chapter 13 says, "And the dragon," that is Satan, "stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion." Isn't it odd that this beast seems to represent all 4 of those kings and kingdoms? It's very odd that it's like that. It's also very odd to me that the kingdom of the Antichrist is called Babylon. And the beast rides on, the beast that the prostitute, the harlot, will ride on is Babylon. So it's, anyways, a lot of similarities here, but you can't easily make just a direct connection because there's differences. And so that's what makes all this quite confusing. Verse 2 says, "And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and feet was like those of a bear, and his mouth the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority." Now, not to repeat too much, but notice right there, you've got not only the lion, the bear, and the leopard mentioned, but you've got the beast mentioned in verse 2. I don't know how that works. I don't even know if it really even connects, because one is describing the beast in the end, and the other is describing 4 kingdoms, and you even got an angel saying these are 4 kings and 4 kingdoms. Let's keep going. The dragon gives the beast power. Verse 3 says, "I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshiped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?' There was given him a mouth speaking arrogant words." Does that sound familiar to what we were just reading, right? In Daniel. Remember in Daniel, it talks about how verse 21 says, "I kept looking, and the horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them." But right up above it, it said, "The horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and was larger in appearance." Very, very similar to what we're seeing here. There was given a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth and blasphemes against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. This fits really close with what we read in Daniel about this figure.
So you think it's Antichrist or something?
I think it's Antichrist. I really do. Yeah. I know I'm taking the long way to get there, but that's where I lean more than the papacy, more than Antiochus Epiphanes, more than these other views. I really see these things as a end time prophecy, and the reason I do so much is because of this part right here, where he talks about if we go back to verse 8, where you end the description. Remember, he's seeing a vision. And what does he see? He sees 4 beasts. And he names the lion. And then he names the bear. And then he names the leopard. And then he names the 10-horned beast. And what does it say right after describing the 10-horned beast? Back at the end of verse 8. Then verse 9. "I kept looking, and what do I see?" He sees the throne of God and judgment beginning. The books are open. The court sits, right? seems like what he's seeing is 4 kingdoms that are right before the Antichrist. Right before the Antichrist comes. I know I can be wrong, but I'm just giving you my thought on it. Because it does fit with the end. Not only does that speak about the end, but then you have a destruction, or the beast in verse 11, the horn that was speaking. He said, I kept looking until the beast was slain, and then it was cast into the fire. Now, there is nothing in history that says Antiochus Epiphanes was slain and cast into the fire. There's nothing in history that says that the Pope was slain and cast into the fire. It doesn't seem to connect. Besides that, there's a whole lot more problems with Antiochus Epiphanes. If I were to read those to you in the commentary. And then you go into verse 13, where again, what are we talking about? We're talking about an end time event. I kept looking, behold, the Son of Man is coming on the clouds. Guys, he didn't come on the clouds until the end. That is very clear through the epistles of Paul, very clear through the Gospels where Jesus is telling about his second coming. It's very clear in the book of Revelation. When he comes in the clouds, it's the end. Again, when I see that, I start going, okay, if this is describing the end, the verse that follows after the description of the 10 horned beasts is verses that are talking about the end, it makes me think maybe this kingdom is something that has to do with the end, and the little horn mentioned here is more likely the Antichrist, right? I mean, I'm sharing my thoughts with you. So if you believe in something else, go ahead.
Commentaries I read said that the small horn, Rome, ancient Rome was destroyed or overtaken.
Yeah.
But yet another Rome-like would come back.
Yeah. Which is called Babylon. Those are synonymous terms. Yeah.
So, and at that, when I first heard this, it just struck me as, where did the 3 little horns go? What happened to them? And I thought, was one of them Christianity in America that has to fall? And, or what is the other religions that have to fall before the Antichrist has the power to take, over all that? So
right.
It just,
where we begin to get into, and this is the part I'm trying to get right up to the edge of the water but not stick our feet into, is all the really detailed interpretations of everything, because we could spend a lot of time, almost every book that you read or every video you watch is going to tell different ways that they see this. What I wanted to kind of, I don't feel like you can ignore it. What is this? And the historical, there's only 2 possibilities, and that's a great thing that Barnes brings up. There are only 2 possibilities historically that this could be describing. One of them is the Greek Empire and Antiochus Epiphanes, who followed Alexander the Great. The other is Rome and the papacy being the little horn. Those are the only 2 historical things out of all history that you could come close to connecting the 10 horn beast to and the little horn that comes out. All right? And these are guys who have done tremendous study of history and everything to try to make the connection. Now, the very same writer here makes 7 very good points. If you want to hear them, I'll read them to you in a second, but no, I won't. I got 5 minutes. The hour's gone again. But he makes 7 very good objections that there is no way that it can be Antiochus Epiphanes. He just blows it up, and they're very, very, very solid. It's amazing that the idea got so far along because it really falls apart when weighed against history and the Bible connecting. He doesn't match up in so many ways that it doesn't. So that leaves really Rome and the papacy, or it's a future with the Antichrist. I really lean toward, because of the judgment of God that's following the description, that it's not something that happened back in 600 AD when the Pope comes up and when there begins to be a Pope. There wasn't a Pope for hundreds of years after Christ. That was something that developed later, got put in place. The receiving of the kingdom and the saints receiving it. You see in Daniel 7:14 14, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and men everywhere. This is the giving that the Ancient of Days gives to the Son when he comes. It says it, and at the end of verse 13, it was presented to him. So that's what I'm talking about right here. And then when we read that interpretation yesterday in Daniel 7 verse 18, but the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever for all ages to come. So those two things are found right here in our passage. Before we get to the angel's interpretation of the fourth beast, but they're also falling right on the heels of Daniel saying what he saw. He sees the four beasts, and then he starts seeing these heavenly things. And then when the angel gives the interpretation, he says that basically when the kingdom is handed over to the Son, it's handed over to the saints as well, right? Which is a latter day, an end time, not Mormon, but a very end of time kind of event here, okay? It's an end of time event that's taking place. Now, let me say this in my last few minutes, and I know we're going to need to pick up and talk a little bit more about this, and when we get further in Daniel, we'll hit some other things where it seems to be a repeat of this. And so we'll end up revisiting and touching on some of this as we go. So it's just good that you hear the repetition because it helps you to start getting things in your head. But remember when Wendy asked the question, how is the timeline of this, if this is an end time figure, if the 10-horned beast is an end time kingdom and an end time leader as that little horn is the Antichrist, how do these three kingdoms fit with these when we know all these existed back before Christ and up to the time of Christ coming? And that's where you get into all kinds of interpretations. The lion is a figure, is an image, it is undeniable, of Great Britain. The eagle is our symbol that represents the United States of America. The bear undeniably represents Russia, right? And they say the leopard, I forget which one it represents, modern kingdoms that go by these things, okay? What is it?
China man?
I don't know if it's China or not. I would have to look at it to be, if y'all know because you read it, you can tell me. I just can't remember which one it was. Anyways, so that's where some people go. Some people say, well, maybe this has to do with the rule of late kingdoms, but I have a real hard time making it work. If I say this is Great Britain, this is Russia, this is whatever that is, and remember this has the eagle's wings attached to it, and the bear has 3 ribs, and the leopard has 4 sets of wings and 4 heads, and to be honest, I have no idea how this fits with the end times unless there is some kind of a gap in between. This is such a difficult subject. I told you that when we started it. These chapters get really tough. Now, if I wanted to just make it real easy on you, I would have read one guy's view on it, come in and said, here's what it is. But then if you read somebody else's, or you watched somebody else's view, or you had a pastor teach you something different, you'd go, what about this? What about this? What I want to do to you is not try to tell you, here's one view and it's the only view. I want you to be able to think on this, because to be honest, if you're going to be a real thinker on Scripture, you need to realize there's room for a lot of possibilities on this. Historically, biblically, there's room. There's absolute room, and you're biblically sound when you realize that this could be interpreted this way, this could be interpreted this way. Some things can be symbolic, some things are literal. And some things we won't know whether it was a symbol or it was literal until we get to that day, both in Revelation and in Daniel. So it is quite difficult. What I've tried to get you to tonight, and it's the end of our hour, is I want you to see the similarities, but also want you to see the differences. The similarities are 4 kings and then a 5th, which is the kingdom of God. 4 kings and the 5th, which is the kingdom of God. That's very, very straightforward. But the last kingdom over here is very different than that one over there.
Just to answer your question, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are the predictions of the 4.
There's a lot of people making the predictions. Right.
Mine says Germany for.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. It's good that y'all are sharing that kind of stuff, because I want you to all to know.
I just looked it up and I'm
there are so many different views and ideas on who all these things are. And kind of a little bit of what Justin was bringing up. I have read books and things where they talk about, you know, so many people are asking, where's America in end time history? Some people believe with all their heart, whole books are written on how America is Babylon. Why do they say that? Because Rome was a symbol of an eagle, and America has a symbol of an eagle, and Rome had sinners and democracy, and America has sinners and democracy, and they make all these connections, say we are Babylon. And to be honest, the days we're living in now, we are quite Babylonian. We are sending out, and the very things that Babylon is talked about in Revelation 17 and 18, it's sounding more and more like America right now. We're sending out so much evil with transgender, homosexuality. We're promoting it, pushing it, telling people we won't trade with them if they don't accept our views of marriage, of homosexuality, of all these different things. In a way, we're doing that. But am I going to sit here and say for sure? No, there's no way I'm going to say that. But I'm just putting out there, there's a lot of questions and a lot of people making guesses, interpretations, thoughts on this, thoughts on that. It's a huge, huge subject.
One simple way to look at it without getting devoted or being obstinate against because you don't match up number 4 to 4 is that kind of what you alluded to earlier. The first one is Christ on the earth the first time, and then his second coming in the second one. So there's no sense there was no reason to come back and put it in there to kind of separate the two times.
Yeah, it's just one way that I was trying to kind of solve the difference there and seeing a difference there. But you know, I know somebody could say, well, this and this can
And that's
match.
not to say that's what it is. But
Yeah, exactly.
That would make sense to me, and that's why God had it written that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we
So-
were studying in Revelation, sometime back,
Yeah.
I made a note here in Revelation 13:11, USA. Beside that's what it says
Oh.
right here in the scripture.
Yeah.
So there's the date 1798 when Israel's taken captive, and then verse 11 I got USA. So I think we are in there.
Well, we are not actually mentioned. You have to interpret. You have to interpret.
Yeah.
Really and truly, if Babylon in Revelation, we know there is no nation called Babylon right now, right?
Right.
But we know that what my professors used to teach us is that when John was on the island of Patmos and he was writing the book of Revelation, he could not write against the Roman Empire. So it is very, very likely that if he was speaking of Rome, he would have put in a word that everyone would have understood to be a symbol of Rome. He can talk about Babylon all day long and he doesn't get killed for it. But Babylon is talking about Rome. The question that we're talking about nowadays is there a end time Babylon, as Revelation says there is? A Babylon that will be destroyed, a Babylon that the Antichrist will be very wrapped up in. There is. What country is it? I have no idea. I think there's a lot of possibilities. And then there may be stuff coming that we haven't seen yet. So let's stop tonight. This is the part where it gets really murky. So
These are phases like